The cold came first. December 15th, 1864. Major General James Steedman watched his troops form up on the left flank, a printer, a politician, now a soldier. He lacked the credentials from West Point. He made up for it on the field. His command included regiments of United States colored troops. They had drilled for weeks in freezing weather, waiting while the Confederate Army of Tennessee dug in just beyond the city. The orders came the night before. His division would demonstrate a supporting attack, a diversion. History could forget an assignment like that. But his men would fight. They would bleed. They would hold the Confederate right, while the main Union effort struck somewhere else. The battle that started that morning would not just be a battle, it would be an annihilation. Nashville was the end of a long mistake, a strategic catastrophe for the Confederacy. It started in September. General John Bell Hood abandoned Atlanta. He took the Army of Tennessee north, a desperate gamble. He would cut Sherman's supply lines. He would draw the Union Army out of Georgia. The campaign cost him everything. At Franklin, Tennessee, on November 30th, Hood ordered a frontal assault straight into entrenched Union positions. His army was torn apart. 6,000 men, maybe 7,000. Gone. 6 generals killed, officers wounded, captured, a generation of command erased in a single afternoon. Now, in mid December, what was left of that army sat in frozen ditches south of Nashville. They faced Major General George H. Thomas. They faced a superior force. The stakes were absolute. If Hood's army survived, it remained a threat. It could disrupt Sherman. It could keep the war in Tennessee alive. If Thomas destroyed it, the Western Confederacy lost its last real army. The pressure came from the top, Ulysses S. Grant. He was tired of waiting. Thomas had spent 2 weeks preparing, organizing, remounting his cavalry, waiting for the ice to thaw. Grant saw delay. He saw weakness. He sent messages, urgent, demanding, attack now. Thomas was methodical, cautious. He wanted the victory to be decisive. Grant just wanted action. The friction grew. It became a crisis. Grant dispatched orders relieving Thomas of command. He decided to go to Nashville himself. The orders never arrived in time. Before they could, Thomas attacked. The pressure was now both strategic and personal. He had to deliver. The assault began around 8 a.m. Fog clung to the ground. The Union plan was a massive wheeling movement, a turn against Hood's left flank. Steedman's division had to hold the Confederate right, pin it down, prevent Hood from shifting his men. They attacked mid-morning, straight into the Confederate line held by Major General Benjamin Cheatham. The ground was open. The works were prepared. The regiments of United States colored troops advanced. The fighting was intense. They took casualties. They did not break through, but they did their job. Cheatham's men stayed put. They couldn't reinforce the left. The demonstration had worked. It was a bloody success. The main effort came from the west. Brigadier General Thomas Wood's of 4 Corps, Major General Andrew Smith's 16 Corps, cavalry under Brigadier General James Wilson. They executed a coordinated wheel, a slow grinding turn against the Confederate flank. Wilson's dismounted cavalry made the difference. They fought on foot. They carried Spencer repeating carbines, superior firepower. They suppressed the defenders, pinned them in their trenches. By early afternoon, the first line of defenses collapsed. The fighting moved to a series of fortified hills. One was called Montgomery Hill. It commanded the approaches. The Union attacks were relentless. Frontal pressure, flanking fire. Confederate units reported being pushed back by sheer weight of numbers, by fire coming from the side. Hood's left flank bent. Then it broke. It collapsed inward. Confederate commanders tried to form new lines. There was no time. The Union pressure never stopped. By nightfall, Hood had been pushed back 2 miles. His army pulled into a shorter, tighter line, anchored on the hills south of the city. The first day belonged to the Union, but Hood's army was still on the field. It was still intact. Thomas renewed the attack on December 16th. The new Confederate line rested on 2 hills, Overton Hill on the right, Shies Hill on the left. Steedman's division was ordered to assault Overton Hill. Again, the attack began in the afternoon. It became one of the battle's bloodiest moments. Union troops advanced uphill into Confederate earthworks, into artillery fire. They were repulsed. They charged again. They were repulsed again. Accounts described fighting at close range. Men reached the Confederate works. They were thrown back. The attacks on Overton Hill failed. Steedman's division paid a heavy price for a position they could not take. While Steedman's men bled on the right, the battle was decided on the left. Shies Hill, named for Colonel William Shy, who commanded the men defending it. Wood and Smith concentrated their corps. Wilson's cavalry moved into position. They pressed the front. They worked their way around the flank. Around 4 p.m., the line gave way. It happened fast. Some accounts say parts of the line started withdrawing before the final assault hit. A misunderstood order, a failure of nerve. No one knows for sure. It started as a withdrawal. It became a rout. Cohesion vanished. Soldiers streamed to the rear. Colonel Shy was killed as his position collapsed. The breakthrough at Shies Hill unraveled everything. The collapse spread down the line, unit by unit. Hood's army fragmented. It ceased to be an army. It became columns of fleeing men. They abandoned their weapons, their equipment, their formations. Wilson's cavalry pursued. They charged into the chaos. They captured cannons, wagons, hundreds of prisoners. By nightfall, the Army of Tennessee was gone. The pursuit began immediately, but the Confederates moved fast. Rain turned the roads to mud. It slowed the Union cavalry. Wilson's horsemen harassed the retreat. They snapped up prisoners. They captured more equipment. Hood's army reached the Tennessee River. They crossed. They escaped. What was left of them? The rear guard fought small actions, delaying tactics, nothing more. By late December, the survivors crossed into Alabama and Mississippi. The invasion of Tennessee was over. It ended in total defeat. The victory was decisive. The casualty figures told the story. The Union lost about 3,000 men, killed, wounded, missing. Confederate losses were double that, 6,000, maybe more. The numbers don't tell the whole story. The Union captured nearly 4,500 prisoners. They captured cannons. They captured the Army's will to fight. The Army of Tennessee still existed on paper, but Franklin and Nashville had destroyed it. Hood gave up his command in January. The remnants were sent east. They fought in the Carolinas, but they were never an army again. For the Union, Nashville was a near-perfect victory. Thomas had done what few commanders ever did. He had destroyed an enemy army on an open field. He secured Tennessee. He eliminated the threat to Sherman's rear. He validated his own cautious preparations. The battle showed how the war had changed. Wilson's cavalry fought like infantry. Repeating carbines changed the math of a firefight. The coordinated wheeling movement of multiple corps showed a new level of sophistication. Nashville was not just a battle, it was the result of a system of supply, of organization, of firepower, a system the Confederacy could no longer match. John Bell Hood had hoped Thomas would attack him in his fortifications. He hoped for another Franklin, a battle where defense could bleed an attacker dry. That hope was a fantasy. Thomas didn't play Hood's game. He used his numbers. He used his mobility. He found the flank, and he broke it. The Army of Tennessee did not just retreat from Nashville. It shattered.